You're on CYInterview.
I'm Kristine. Featured columnist Jay Bilstein is with me today on CYInterview. We welcome singer-musician Kristine Mirelle, a former X Factor contestant. Ms. Mirelle has just moved to Las Vegas. She'll be making her performing debut as a resident with the Las Vegas Symphony Orchestra on Friday, June 11th. Thanks for joining us on CYInterview. How are you?
Thank you so much for having me. I'm doing very well, thank you. How are you?
I'm great. Well, to begin, Kristine, you were in Los Angeles for about 10 years. Why did you decide you wanted to move to Las Vegas, and then how did you find this opportunity to now join up and start performing with the Las Vegas Symphony Orchestra?
Yeah, I'm originally from New Mexico, and Vegas is a lot, it's a lot like New Mexico. It's still, you have the Strip, but it still has this nice, small town feel. I was in LA for 10 years. It was just a little different. I had a great time out there, did a lot of performing, I enjoyed it. I just always loved Vegas. I just love that everyone that's coming here, they're celebrating something, even if it's, if it's a birthday or a graduation or a marriage, or even if they're getting a divorce, they're still celebrating something. And I just always loved that people were always in such a good mood, especially, as a performer, to see people just really appreciate you and what you're doing for them in those moments that you're, singing or playing for them. And so I just, after 10 years of being in LA, I decided to come out here. I bought a house out here, had a little baby boy, and I've only been here officially for a few months now, so it's been just a short time so far.
So how did the opportunity come up with the Las Vegas Symphony Orchestra?
Oh yeah, so I met the CEO, CYInterview. He had reached out to me on Instagram. I have another company where I actually teach artists how to turn what they love, music and performing, into a living. And I do a lot of marketing, and he had reached out. He had they were putting out an album themselves, and he had reached out because he had seen some materials that I had posted, and we started talking, and we decided to work together on a few different levels, and one of those things was me performing. So kind of just going back and forth with his goals with the orchestra, and mine as well with being new in town, and we just decided this was going to be a cool opportunity. And I've never played with an orchestra ever in my life. I've always played with bands, and I've always played with those types of things, but this was like a big dream of mine. So I was, jumped at the opportunity right away. So I was really excited to meet him, and he's been really just, kind, and it kind of just invited me in. I almost feel like I've kind of been in Vegas for a while now, even though it's only been a few months. But I'm super excited, and that's going to be this Friday on June 11th. So it'll be my first orchestral performance. So I'm stoked.
So obviously, aside from being a singer, you're a talented pianist. What is it going to be like to perform with an orchestra? And tell us about this event that's coming up on the 11th at the Nevada Room.
Yeah. So like I mentioned, I've played a lot with bands, and I've done really, I've had a really cool career, gotten to travel the world and do some really cool stuff, but I've just never gotten to play with, that, I guess, just lots of violin players and cello players, and just that sort of thing to me is really exciting. And I've always written classical music, so I'll also be writing and work. We have other dates that we're going to be doing with the orchestra in the future as well. And so for me, it's just kind of like been this lifelong dream since I was a little girl. But because I sing a lot, I ended up just kind of getting into the swing of I was doing a lot of performing, singing, and playing the piano. But this will be the first time that I am just sitting with an orchestra and just playing. I'm not going to sing at all. I'm just playing. So it's when you ask how it's going to feel, I don't know. It kind of just seems like it's one of those things I haven't been this excited about something in a really long time. So this will definitely be one of those things that I can cross off my bucket list. And it's going to be this Friday at the Nevada Room, June 11th, here in Las Vegas. There's going to be a 5-course meal, red carpet. It's like a gala, a black tie event. And then they're doing an incredible show. Shay, the CEO, had visited Mozart's home in Vienna and found that he had children, he had sons that were also composers, which I didn't know. I thought this was so cool. So his sons were also composers, and they kind of just never got any spotlight because of who their father was. So the whole concert is called Sons of Mozart, and it's all of the compositions, well, not all the compositions, but a select number of the compositions that Mozart's sons wrote. So it's a pretty cool concept. I'll be doing a few original pieces of mine, but the rest of the show will be his son's compositions.
Understandable. Jay?
Kristine, first of all, so good to be speaking with you. What gave you your initial impetus in music? What was it? A person? Was it going to a performance when you were young? What initiated that spark?
Yeah, that's a great question. So when I was little, all my family, they all play instruments. And growing up, my family is all from Mexico, and we grew up in New Mexico, and we didn't have a whole lot. We grew up in government housing, and, at times we didn't have cable or anything like that. But I had this old piano that my mom had bought me, and she put me in piano lessons, and she just said, hey, you have 1 year. You have to take it for 1 year. If you don't like it, you can stop. And I was like 4 years old. And I never stopped. I fell in love with it. And for me, I just, I always tell everyone, growing up, I always thought that like rich people could eat Lunchables. I don't know if you remember those. There's the little packages that have the little meat and cheese and crackers. And so I remember telling myself, because all of my friends, just everyone was just, it was all a whole government housing type situation. And I just thought, man, one day music it's going to change my life. And I'm going to be able to eat a Lunchable every single day. That was just my goal as a little girl. One day I'm going to be able to eat a Lunchable. So really I fell in love with music and I fell in love with the idea of kind of just changing the life that I grew up knowing and saying, you know what, I'm going to just do more for myself. And, my mom had me when she was 17 and, and they were amazing. But I wanted to see the world, and I felt like music could do that.
For people like yourself who are making their way in the world as a performer, if you had to break things down, how much has to do with raw stick-to-itiveness? How much has to do with your craft?
I would say, I always, I mentioned that I talk to a lot of artists and I do a lot of coaching and I help them also build their own careers. And I always tell everyone, I meet some of the most talented people in the world that are just struggling. And I say it's like 10% talent and it's like 90% everything else you do. It's kind of like if you're a really great chef, if you make really great cookies, it doesn't mean that you're going to have a really successful bakery, right? So I always think it's the same thing with music. It's like getting out there, performing as much as you can, being great with your crowd, giving everybody your time, making sure to show up on time. That's a big thing for musicians. And then, just not being afraid to ask, like even with, the orchestra, they had, showed me some wonderful pieces that I'm excited to play in the future. And for this particular performance, I wasn't afraid to ask, though. Here, I would like to play a couple original songs. Do you think that would be okay? And I think a lot of that, too, like just not being afraid to ask for what you want and go after it, even if you're not ready, even if you're not prepared, really. I think I've said yes to a lot of things and then just made it happen. So I really think it's like 10% talent. Absolutely, every musician needs to perfect their craft. But more importantly, they need to go out there and start taking action to be able to start doing the things that they want to do and start being able to make a living doing music or traveling or whatever it is that the person wants to do in their career.
I've heard it said so many times, the only way to start is to start. Mm-hmm. And, I also, what's that expression, life isn't a dress rehearsal for life. And I think a lot of times, especially people who are very, very sincere about their craft, whether they're painters, whether they're singers or dancers or whatever, put so much into the development of skill side and the perfection of it that I think sometimes they don't realize that a lot of the people who've gotten ahead were good, but they were far from perfect, but they were good, but they had the drive to push forward, to ask, and to get attention. As you were speaking, I was thinking, what if Mozart had been, performing in Tierra del Fuego all the way down at, the base of South America, right near Antarctica? Would he have been Mozart, or would he have been some local person who was just really well known as, wow, this guy, what a composer, what a piano player, but would the world have known? And
Right.
I've had some experiences similar to yours, and sometimes they're heartbreaking. I mean, I come from New York City. There were times I went into pubs, and I heard people playing, and I said, there is, and these were mostly places where they were, people playing rock music and so forth. And the only thing that could distinguish them from the big names of the time was the fact that they were playing in a little pub, and the other people were playing in stadiums or in concert halls, what have you. And a lot of times they were actually better. At any point in time, has that ever frustrated you? Have you ever looked and said, gee whiz, for my level of talent, I really want to propel myself further? Have you ever met with that kind of frustration?
I love that you brought this up because it's something that I think, you work so much time at your talent and stuff. I can see how that would come up. But actually for me, I never felt that way. I've always just admired people that work very hard and that take chances and that take risks. So whenever I would see people that were successful, even if they weren't as talented as me in that area, it didn't mean that they're not more talented in other areas like ambition or, being smart with their choices. And so for me, every time I meet people that I go, wow, they're not even that talented, but look at what they've done, I actually admire them because I'm like, wow, they took that tiny bit of talent that they have and they turned it into this massive amount of success. What can I learn from this person? And then I start to study them and I go, this is incredible. Because when I first started out, I was in New Mexico and I was like 16 or 17 years old. And I had recorded my first album in a friend's closet, and I had gotten it printed out. I got these CDs printed and, made the little labels myself and stuck it on there and wrote it on with a Sharpie. And I started going door to door, and I started knocking on people's doors and asking people if they wanted, I would tell them my story. Hey, I'm, just a singer here. I'd like to, see if you're interested in buying my music. And 9 out of 10 people would tell me no. And they wouldn't just tell me no, like they would slam the door in my face. They were mad at me. They'd tell me to go get a real job. And it brought me to tears at many times. I cried in like many alleyways and, it was heartbreaking, but it was something that was very real about the world. And it doesn't matter how talented you are. It doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter, where you're from or what you look like. There's going to be people that support you and people that don't support you. And so whenever I see people that have achieved success, I go, I know that they've probably, if they don't even have that much talent, then they've probably even had more rejection. So the fact that they were able to still keep going, I like that hustler mentality. I like that mentality where I know that person probably got knocked down so many times and they kept going. So I'm usually the opposite. I'm usually in admiration of that person because I'm like, how did they do it? Like they must have really worked hard and they did something really special. So I just try to take notes and I try to apply that in my life.
Based on what you're saying, I'd like to, I don't know if I could conjure it up, do my best Rocky Balboa voice and say, absolutely. Because I remember there was a scene that Chris and I speak about often in Rocky Balboa, which was Sylvester Stallone's, well, up to now, really the final part of that franchise if we don't talk about the Creed movies. And he has a scene where he's talking with his son and he says something like, life will knock you to the ground and keep you there if you let it. No one hits as hard as life. And he talks about it's about keep on getting up. And I think that is a very, very powerful lesson for any performer, for any artist. Keep on getting up, keep on moving forward. And I think your attitude is magnificent because it's not about having a jealousy or envy or being frustrated by somebody else's success. It's saying, well, they kind of figured out that Rubik's Cube of how to get ahead. What can I learn from them? And I think that's a magnificent attitude and very, very powerful. Chris?
Kristine, so aside from working with the Las Vegas Symphony Orchestra, obviously you've mentioned that you're still new to the entertainment capital of the world, but what other entertainment projects are you looking at possibly entertaining in the future? What would you like to get involved in?
Oh yeah, so I've prior to being in Vegas, again, I lived in LA and I've had the opportunity to tour and do a lot of performances and that sort of thing. But I've released many albums, and I was actually signed with a label for a little while, so I did a bit of touring. throughout the United States. And then right now I have a new album, actually 2 new albums or EPs that I'm releasing. So one, I've been working with local entertainer, Frankie Moreno. I met him a long time ago here in Vegas, actually, and so we've finished an EP. So, and I've actually performed and opened for him here, and you know, he's just such a great example of an independent artist as well. He, you know, owns the 3rd record for most Billboard #1s in the world, and most people don't even know who he is. So, it's, you know, pretty incredible. So, we did an entire EP, and then simultaneously, I worked on a Spanglish album, which is all like reggaeton, Latin inspired, with a couple other really great artists. There's a big artist named Baby Bash. He's a multi-platinum artist in the Latin world, and a couple, you know, platinum producers that I'm working with, and that's finished as well. We've released 2 songs off the album and a couple more music videos coming up. So just creating music and you know, that's my favorite thing to do, is to create and then to continue to perform and you know, find those really cool opportunities in Vegas. I can't tour like I used to because I have a 1-year-old now. So that's why Vegas seemed like such a great place, because the world comes here. You know, you don't have to go to the world. The whole world comes to Vegas. So it just made sense for what I wanted to do with my music and what was happening with, you know, having a child and not being able to, you know, get on a plane and be gone for weeks or months at a time.
Well said. So for singer-musician Kristine Mirelle, featured columnist Jay Bildstein, and CY Interview, I'm Kristine.